And so leaving the government, there's an opportunity to be an entrepreneur. There's also an opportunity to be more present for my family for the first time in 15 years, which was something I really took to heart. So I could always take on more clients. I have a stable of guys who have since retired from the government who I can work with to farm out that sort of work. So I'm always open to more clients, but I like to make sure that it's somebody that I can serve and that I can help first. I don't want to just, be on the phone for somebody who doesn't actually need my services, right?
What it is, Brad Lee back again with another episode of Dropping Bombs today in the studio, folks. As always, I've got a real treat for you. Kristofor Healey is in the house. What's happening?
Not much, man. Thanks for having me. I'm glad you pronounced that right. Sometimes it trips people up with that K.
No, Kristofor with a K.
Yeah. Ever since that movie Frozen came out, people want to call me Kristoff. So I'm glad you got it right.
Hey, if you guys don't know this dude, you can follow him at team_Healey, Healey on IG, or Kristofor Healey on LinkedIn. Now, keep in mind, that doesn't tell you who he is. Former DHS Special Agent, Department of Homeland Security Special Agent. He's now a leadership coach. He's also an author. If you guys want to pick up his book, Indispensable, A Tactical Plan for the Modern Man. But basically, Kristofor is a former award-winning DHS Special Agent whose work investigating India-based tele-fraud networks that were targeting American citizens was the subject of the top 2022 podcast Chameleon, Scam Likely. And basically, you're a badass that runs around busting fraudsters.
Yeah, I fight nerd crime, or I did anyway. That's what my wife says anyway.
How'd you get into that?
It's an interesting story. I was an archaeologist before I got into this. And so, yeah.
Archaeologist?
I got an anthropology degree. I was working in the field doing archaeology work, and then 9/11 happened, and I decided I wanted to have a career change. So it took a little bit for DHS to open up. After 9/11, they kind of shut down the government. They weren't hiring anybody. They only wanted people who could speak Arabic or Pashtun or something like that.
Shukran marhaba katana khabar. Actually,
goodness.
That's Farsi, but same thing.
Well, that would have worked too. I spoke a little French, and that was it. And they said, you got to wait. So I got brought on with DHS as soon as they started hiring, brought people on, and got shipped down I grew up in Maine. I got shipped down to the Rio Grande Valley. So I got sent 2,600 miles from home all the way to the border, and worked down there. I worked for DHS for over 15 years, most of it on the border. And how
did they train you to handle these fraud cases?
I kind of was self-trained in that regard. Now I went off to the academy. So I went to two different law enforcement academies. Our academies for the federal law enforcement agencies are in Georgia. So I went off to Brunswick, Georgia. I learned how to be an immigration enforcement agent first. So my first job was with ICE, was rounding up folks who were in the country, overstayed visas, people who shouldn't have been here, people committing crimes that like MS-13s that needed to be sent back to El Salvador or wherever.
So real quickly, let me ask you, what's your opinion of the border conditions right now?
It's a hot mess. I mean, that's being charitable.
I mean, I see videos. I never trust the media, so I never know who's doing good, who's doing bad. They say, Trump's a criminal, look at this, look at that. And then they'll say, all kinds of shit. So I never really take media at what they're saying because it's 9 times out of 10 skewed in some way.
Yeah.
But I see videos of people just walking across the border. So is there no more border control at all? No,
there is. But the thing about during the Trump administration, they just enforced the law. That's really the difference. We're just not enforcing the law anymore.
Yeah, but who gets to decide that? Because don't you guys take an oath?
Yeah.
So then your boss can say, let him in. And you just say, okay.
Yeah, I mean, they're getting arrested, but they're getting released into the country. So that's the difference. Now, the difference was the Trump administration had something called migrant protection protocols. You probably heard it referred to as Remain in Mexico. And essentially what it said was you can't come in and just say, I want asylum. You can't just do that after you've crossed through 4 other countries to get here. And the Biden administration, when they came in, they got rid of that. And so everybody's coming across from all over the world coming in. Now,
requesting asylum.
99 out of 100 of those asylum claims are BS.
Of course they are.
Most of them are just people who they know I'm going to apply for asylum. I don't have an actual credible fear. Because asylum, it's a legal term. It gets thrown around by the media.
Asylum makes it sound like protection. I need protection.
That's what it is, but it's protection. It's very specific in the law. There's like 8 or 9 different categories you have to fit into. You have to be like a political dissident. You have to be
Persecuted.
They're persecuted, exactly. In some countries, like homosexuality is illegal, so you might be fleeing from being killed because your lifestyle or whatever the case may be. So your religion is being persecuted. 9 out of 10 people who are crossing the border right now and claiming asylum are economic migrants. They're coming across and saying, I just want to come to America because it's a better life. And the border's wide open. People are coming across. And so the Border Patrol agents that I deal with and talk to on a daily basis, I still do analysis for news organizations about the border. And so those guys are just, the morale is just gone. There's no morale anymore. They're having a terrible time.
And I can't blame them.
Yeah.
I mean, they're trying, just like if I was a cop and I was arresting people for crimes, and then the judges and the juries weren't keeping them there.
That's exactly.
I would eventually be like, what am I doing?
That's exactly it. And we're seeing that like across law enforcement right now. There's like 800,000 cops in the country, right? And we're seeing that in districts all over the country where guys are arresting people and they're getting turned out, let go.
Especially in California.
California, New York. I mean, you name it. All over the place right now. So where I grew up, Portland, Maine, it's happening. So the border is just, it's part of that same sort of thing that's happening right now where, laws don't matter.
Do you think if Trump became elected again, that he would stop that again?
It would be like flipping a switch. I think any one of the Republican candidates has that same kind of profile about the border. Turn those migrant protection protocols back on.
Yeah, a lot of people
enforce the law.
Yeah, but a lot of people will think, you're being mean. These people need help. We should let everybody in. Which again, to me, dude, I'm on the fence, no pun intended. I'm on the border fence because again, if someone is being, I don't want to say abused because I mean that's subjective, but if somebody truly needs to leave their country or they're going to die, I think we should have asylum for people like that.
And we do.
However, I still think they need to come through the gate. Like there should be gates. I totally believe in a border fence. I believe that if you want into the country, get in line, apply like everyone is, and come in. So
I got personal experience in this. My 2 daughters are both born in China, and we adopted them. It cost us $40,000 to bring each of them home. $40,000 per adoption. And so it gets under my skin when I see people
did they get American citizens now?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Parents are American citizens. They became American citizens when they entered the country, but we had to go through the process. We had to go to China, spend 2 weeks in China. We had to get visas. We had to go to the U.S. consulate there. We had to do all of those things. We had to be vetted. They had to be vetted.
Hoop jumping, I call it.
So you remember Dennis Miller when he was, SNL?
Yeah.
His whole thing is like, hey, come into the country, just sign the guest book, and I think that's where I come down on it. I spent, my wife grew up on the border. I spent more than a decade down there, policing the border. I worked at a DEA task force. I worked on the border corruption task force with the FBI. I was there the whole time during the migrant child crisis in 2014. There are people who are legitimately fleeing terrible things, and they need a place where they can find asylum.
That's where I say, let them in.
But the issue becomes, how many countries are you crossing to get to our border where you could have made an asylum claim and didn't? So at some point, it becomes an issue of you want to come to the United States because you want to come to the United States, not because you're fleeing what's happening in your country. So it becomes an economic issue. Yeah, but so you want to talk about making it easier for people like that to come in the country? I'm all ears, but come through the right way, do it the right way.
Yeah, to me, I don't care why you want to come here.
Yeah,
you should be able to come here, but follow the rules.
It's not that hard, right? And so when these guys are coming across, and this is what's dangerous about it, is we've had, and the August numbers, like, as we're recording this, they haven't dropped the August crossing numbers yet. DHS hasn't put those out yet, which is a good sign this late in the month that those are bad numbers. And things started to drop down when they got rid of Title 42. And then they popped back up and they've gone to record highs again. We're talking 200,000 people a month coming across. Now, those border communities that these people are coming through are dealing with the brunt of that. The town my wife grew up in, Harlingen, Texas, that's got 70,000 people, 75,000 people.
Are they all homeless or what are they doing?
Well, they're coming in. Border Patrol is, they can only keep so many. They only have capacity for so many people at a time. So they process them. They give them what's called a notice to appear, which the immigrants refer to as a permiso. And what it tells them is come back for a court date at a later time. And it's basically
which they never do.
They never do. About 99 out of 100 of them never do. And so they can get into an airport. They can cross through airport security with that permiso. They can cross the checkpoints, going north towards Houston or San Antonio or wherever else. And once those guys are in the country, we typically never hear from them again. But a fair amount of them, while they are getting set up to go, they need a place to stay. Border Patrol processes them in 72 hours. They let them out. They go to different NGOs in the area. They go to different shelters in the area. Those shelters are overrun. So Border Patrol rents out housing in hotels and things like that. Our taxpayer dollars are paying for these people to stay in hotels for extended periods of time. So it's a mess, and these communities are bearing the burden of that. If you've been seeing the news at all, you see the New York City mayor right now griping about 100,000 people that have landed in New York City because of the border crisis. Man, we're getting 10,000 people a day in small towns in South Texas, and you're complaining about the biggest country the biggest city in the country is complaining about 100,000 that you've received over the course of 2 years. I don't have a lot of sympathy for guys like that.
Not only that, I mean, dude, if they made it clear to New York, there's a problem. How'd you get clear up there?
Yeah.
They're not Canadians.
Well, we're flying them up there. Your tax dollars are paying for that. You're putting them on planes and flying them up there. Now, it's not just the Texas governor putting them on buses and saying, hey, you guys got to share the burden. We're overwhelmed here, which he's doing, and I think it's been very effective. But the Biden administration is shipping these people on flights all over the country. They say, where do you want to go? And so we're completing the smuggling process for the cartels.
But do you think they're doing it so they will have more votes?
You know, that's maybe the long-term play. I think a lot of people assume that, but you know, I don't think you can assume that, because where I came from in South Texas, people aren't naturally voting blue or red, right? They vote their values, and there's a lot of family values, and there's a lot of, people have religious values, and there's been a major shift. Actually, if you look at the southern border counties in Texas during the last election, they had all gone for Clinton in 2016. They all flipped to Trump in 2020. And these are counties that hadn't gone for a Republican in like 40 years. So I don't know that it's a vote thing. I think it's more of a, it's a misguided kindness sort of thing.
Are illegal immigrants allowed to vote?
No, but in some places like New York, if you're a resident of the city, you can vote in municipal elections. And so I
think you need to be an American citizen to vote.
You have to be an American citizen to vote in any federal election.
But they don't require ID.
Depends on the state. I got to show an ID to vote in Texas. I don't know what it's like.
You have to?
Like here. Yeah.
Which makes sense. Again, I can't even believe that's being argued.
I can't believe it's controversial. I mean,
me either. Dude, show your passport.
Yeah.
And by the way, a passport,
well, there's in
you don't have an American citizen without a passport.
Right.
And if you do, go get a passport.
We've got, I think, 7 or 8 different types of IDs they accept in Texas. So your driver's license, military ID, if you've got any sort of state certification or licensing, like I have a private investigator's license, I could show that.
But illegal immigrants can get a driver's license.
In some states, or they can get one fake. I mean, it's pretty darn easy to get a fake that looks pretty good.
Well, anyway, I didn't bring you here to talk about the border problem.
We can.
even though, again, I mean, a lot of people think I'm some staunch conservative, and listen, I go both ways on a lot of things. It just depends, because what I consider myself is fair.
Yeah.
So someone needs asylum, give them asylum. Somebody wants to come here because it's a better life. Let them come here.
Yeah.
Give them a better life. I don't care how many people want to come here. They should all be welcomed here. That's how the country was created in the first place.
Yeah.
But do it legally.
Right.
Now, someone will say, yeah, but the lines are too long and you never get in and blah, blah, blah.
Pass a law.
Again, then fix that. Yeah. You don't say, well, then screw it. Because other than that, it's like in California right now, apparently you can steal without any consequences as long as it's $950 or less.
Yeah. What do you think that does?
Yeah, but who's making this shit up? You can't steal if it's a 50-cent pack of gum. Right. You can't steal. Now, well, the jails are overran. Then again, fix that. Don't fix the stupid problem with making more problems.
Government has a habit of making almost everything they touch worse. And I 15 years being in the government, I can tell you that there's very few problems that they approach that they make better. We fix the problem on the border by enforcing the law that exists.
Period. And by the way, it's the law. We're supposed to enforce it. And when I look at guys like you, I think to myself, didn't you take an oath?
Yeah.
Because when I see, and again, it's the media, so I never give it too much credit. But when I see on the news, these riots are happening, and the police were told to stand down. And so they're doing what they're told, which is to stand down. Well, then they're violating their oath, because their oath didn't say, unless I was told not to, I will enforce the law. If you're a law enforcement officer and you have a badge and you took an oath to enforce the law, enforce the law. And if your seniors are telling you not to, they should be held accountable.
Well, that's what you're seeing. I mean, if you follow, you're seeing the IRS whistleblowers who came forward and they're saying, hey, we took an oath to uphold the law, and they're not letting us do our job.
What do you mean the IRS whistleblowers?
You're talking about Hunter Biden stuff.
Yeah, but what's going on there?
They had 2 IRS special agents who were investigating him for tax fraud and everything else, and they came forward to Congress and said, we're not being allowed to prosecute this case. It's being shut down by people higher up in DOJ. And so they testified before Congress, and that's the sort of stuff that...
And what happened?
Nothing yet, but, you know...
but like that, my friend, boils my blood.
Yeah.
Like, why are they above the law?
On the problem. It shined a light on the problem. And so that's where guys like that, the courage it took for those guys to come forward, because that's the job. I didn't work for IRS, but I was a special agent. I know the pressure those guys are feeling right now as special agents, and what they're dealing with from political pressure, from, especially, I mean, you're taking on the son of the most powerful man in the world, and you're standing up and saying they're treating this guy differently. And these guys are nonpartisan criminal investigators. What we do as special agents, we look at the facts, and the facts drive your train. The facts take you to where you need to go. And then you present them to an attorney. An attorney looks at them and they apply the law, and then you indict or you don't.
Period.
That's
Doesn't matter who it is.
Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Son of the president, who cares?
Doesn't matter.
Whatever happened to his laptop, doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
Hey, the list of who went to Epstein's Island, we're gonna conceal that. Who's deciding these things? If
People
there's a
above
list,
my pay grade, that's for sure.
yeah, but I mean, if there's a list of who went there, that list should be public record.
Yeah, that's one that like you've got my full attention on that, because you know, to me, I've been in a lot of jails in my career. I've been in a lot of prisons in my career. The idea that somebody that high profile, who is locked down, who had that sort of security on him, could be allowed to commit suicide blows my mind. After all the jails that I've been in, all the federal facilities, I can't imagine how that happened.
Well, there's 2 lines of thinking there. Number one, I lean towards he's not dead. I'll bet you anything he's not dead. That wasn't him. That was a bullshit. They needed him dead, but they know if he died, there's, let's call them envelopes that would be mailed out, proof that would be mailed out. So they had to, I mean, dude, the guy fell asleep. The cameras weren't working. Bullshit. And then he is dead, but he didn't commit suicide. One of those are the answer. He didn't commit suicide.
You know who prosecuted that case?
Who?
Well, not the case against him, but the case against, who was the girl's name that he worked with? His
Ghislaine Maxwell.
That one, yeah. You know who prosecuted that? Who the attorney was that prosecuted it?
Who?
Jim Comey's daughter. The FBI director's daughter.
I know, but like, how does the whole world not care?
I know, it's crazy, right?
Anyway, the reason I brought you here was basically to protect my listeners, because my listeners, a lot of them are entrepreneur, business owners, or want to be, soon to be entrepreneur type business owners, which, by the way, just for the record, I think everyone in the world should be an entrepreneur in some case. Even if you have a job, even with like the Department of Security, I don't care if you're military, what you are, police officer, you should go down, create an LLC, right? And by the way, I've got a place that can help you with all this. So just, shoot me an email and I'll get you to the right place, but create an LLC and start a side hustle. Even if it makes very little money, just the tax benefits could be worth doing. And then over time, because it's there, you eventually build a side hustle, and pretty soon everybody is working for themselves. Now, some people say, well, Brad, who's going to do this and who's going to do that if everyone's working for themselves? Listen, I don't care who here as a W-2 employee, if they said, Brad, I'm going to do my job, but I want you to pay my company as opposed to me. I don't care. As long as the job gets done, I don't care how you're set up. Yeah. The government might, but I don't. But anyway, that's why I brought you, because your fraud knowledge. So tell me about like some of the things that are happening to small business owners that's costing, jillions, like this scam with the IRS. What were they doing?
So did you ever get a call from somebody saying this is the IRS and you owe us money? Okay. So that
but I
scam,
could tell that they were bullshit.
you could tell, did they have an accent?
Yes.
Yeah. So
Hello.
Yeah.
You owe us money, motherfucker. I swear they were cussing. And I said, and you're from the IRS?
Yeah.
They're like, yeah, where can I call you back? You're not fucking listening. And I'm like, oh my God, this is so obvious. How are people falling for that bullshit?
People are falling for that in large part because, like, I'm a Gen Xer, right? Are you a Gen Xer?
Yep.
Yeah. All right. So our generation is a little more cynical, I would think. The baby boomer generation is a lot more trusting. And so the people who are falling for that scam or were falling for that scam, the average age of my victims was 73. So you're talking about people who are my parents, my grandparents' generation that, the voice on the other end of the line says, this is the IRS and you owe us money, or this is a government agency. You grew up in a different era. You grew up in a time when you can trust the government. You can trust the person on the other end of the phone line. And so people are falling for that in large part because, again, aggressive tactics like that. But what I tell a lot of people, and you'll appreciate this as a guy with a sales background, scammers are very, very good salesmen. They're very, very good at selling their product, which is stealing your money. And so, and they're just professionals at it. Like, you're a professional at what you do, or I'm a professional at what I do. And so we had over 300 million that we know of that was lost to that scam between about 2013 and 2020 when we took these guys down, or 2016 when we took them down, but it's continued.
How did you take them down from being from another country?
So my team started investigating, and like I said, about 2013, we started getting these complaints from people from India who were H-1B visa holders who were in the country legally. And they started getting telephones from people saying, this is ICE, we're going to deport you if you don't pay this fine because you didn't fill out your paperwork correctly. So I was sitting in Houston. I was a DHS Special Agent at the time, and I was the duty agent. I got a couple of these complaints saying, hey, we think somebody from CIS, which is Citizenship and Immigration Services, is shaking people down. And so I started looking into it and found out pretty quickly that what was happening was these victims were being told to go buy gift cards, go buy like Green Dot or My Vanilla or whatever gift cards.
See, isn't that a red flag?
It should be.
You want paid in gift cards?
You're from India. You're an H-1B visa holder. You don't know how things work here, right? You're living in this country because you got a job at Microsoft. You got a job wherever. And so they would go down and they would get pressured into buying these cards. And they're terrified because the money they're earning while they're here on that H-1B is maybe feeding 20 mouths back home.
Yeah.
So if they're getting threatened with deportation, that's serious. That's frightening. Maybe I did fill out the paperwork wrong. I don't know. Maybe this is how it works here. So they go down, they buy these gift cards, they load cash on them, they scratch off the numbers on the back, they read them to the callers. And what I was seeing as I started to subpoena records and documents is that what I was expecting to see was some guy walking into Walmart and using these gift cards to buy like a big screen TV or something, I was going to identify who that guy was and go arrest him. What I started to see was these gift cards are being spent down all over the United States, all over the place. One victim might have their money shotgunned out to like 5 different people. And we would see these runners walk into different stores, and they were all young Indian males, all of them. And so they were impossible to identify. Like, you have a 20-something-year-old Indian male on a grainy CCTV footage. And so we kind of worked backwards from that. We started looking into, who was calling the victims. We started looking at phone records. We started connecting phone records to incidents and dates and times that we knew about. And that's how we started to piece together who these guys were walking into these stores. Because of the phone tolls and the phone records, and we started to piece it all together that way. And ultimately, it took us about 3 years to put this whole thing together, but we ended up indicting 56 individuals in the U.S. and India and 5 corporate entities, and we ended up arresting 25 people domestically, and there's still red notices. Interpol still has red notices out on all the guys in India because they haven't been extradited yet. But yeah, it took about 3 years of investigating and digging, of pulling threads, of talking to victims, of following the evidence where it led to get that big case brought across the finish line.
That's interesting. So what are some of the most current scams people need to watch out for?
I just listed a vehicle for sale on Facebook Marketplace, and I found like 3 new scams as soon as I listed that vehicle. If you've ever listed anything for sale on Facebook Marketplace or on Craigslist or anything like that, there's a ton of different advanced fee frauds that are out there. People are asking for your VIN number right away because they want to create a fake sales page for that same vehicle so they can rip somebody off and charge $1,000 deposit to hold it for a vehicle that doesn't exist. One of the big ones that's impacting people right now, this will make you laugh, is there's what I call the puppy scam. There's just about 80% or 85%. If you're looking for a dog and you go online, first thing you're going to do is go to Google and say, Pomeranian puppies or Sheepadoodle puppies or whatever in, Houston. About 80 to 85% of the websites that pop up when you Google that are going to be scam websites. They're going to be designed to get you to pay an advance fee to pay for this puppy, to reserve this puppy, and then they're going to ship it to you, and they're going to charge you for shipping, but then it's going to get lost in shipment, and they're going to charge you for this, or then it's going to have to be quarantined, and they're going to charge you for vet fees, and on and on and on. So those little advance fee frauds that pull money out of people, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, that's a lot of money in this economy for people. I mean, people don't have exactly reserves sitting around. So when you start bleeding people dry like that, you're bankrupting families. And of course, the IRS scam, it changes from telephone scams impersonating the IRS to telephone scams impersonating Social Security Administration to different agencies, the FBI, DEA. They change it a little bit.
I got hit by that Social Security one too. They said my Social Security will be revoked if I don't do some things. And I'm like, how do you revoke a Social Security number?
Yeah. What they're telling people on that one is, so you'll get that call and they'll say, hey, your Social Security number, we pulled over a vehicle in El Paso, Texas that was loaded with drugs and it looked like a crime scene. There was blood in the car. We seized the vehicle, right? And then they tell you, we found a Social Security card in there. It's your Social Security card. We know this isn't you, but you're
liable.
You're liable because the rental car was rented with your Social Security, et cetera, whatever it is. The people who are falling for that, again, typically elderly. And what they're telling them is you need to go pull all your cash out of the bank. You need to take this money out of, your Bank of America account or whatever, and you need to put it in a box and you need to send it to a federal agent. And this is his name and this is the address. And we're going to put it in a trust and it's going to be held in trust until you're issued a new Social Security number. People are falling for that. I was out there literally intercepting packages with $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 cash in them where people were being, convinced to do this. And once they get someone on the hook, they'll do it again and again and again and again. So you'll get individuals who fall for it once, and then they're like, well, I also have a retirement account over here. Oh, you got to drain that one too. I had victims who lost millions, $2 million. And same thing. It's Indian nationals walking in. What they're doing is they're giving an address for like a CVS or a Walgreens, and they're having it shipped via FedEx or UPS to one of these drop ship locations. The guys will walk in there, they'll give a fake ID that has the name of the quote unquote federal agent that the victim's supposed to ship it to. And then they walk out with a box of cash. They go and they distribute it into 15, 20 different bank accounts, or they buy money orders, or they buy Bitcoin and they distribute it that way. So it's an absolute mess. I think the best thing that people can do is be suspicious of any phone call you get. The government is never, ever, ever going to call you and demand that you give them money. The IRS, if they're going to contact you, it's going to be by letter. You're going to get a letter in the mail. Social Security Administration.
I'd still be, scrutinizing letters in the mail.
Absolutely. Because a lot of these guys, what they'll do to back this up is they will do like a fax. They'll say, hey, can I fax you this? Can I email you this? It's got my credentials. And they'll fax over what looks like federal credentials. They'll fax over DHS letterhead on paperwork with a whole thing about this is the case that we're investigating in El Paso that involves your Social Security number to back it up. And again, I talk about this a lot, but I think law enforcement and sales have so much in common. And I think scamming and sales have a lot in common. It's all the same skill set. You're just using it in different manners. And so these guys are very, very good at selling themselves as the real deal, which made it very, very hard for guys like me to come in and authenticate ourselves to victims, to say, hey, listen, I'm here to give you some justice and to fix this problem. And you're sitting here telling me you don't trust me because you just got ripped off for $100,000. It makes it harder for me to do my job. And so you really have to find that rapport with these people. But these guys are very good at doing that. They're good at finding that rapport. They're good at finding those pain points and exploiting them. And they know that, again, it's a generational thing, but that elderly folks are far more likely to fall for this. And that's why they're running the Social Security Administration version of this scam, because they know that people who are receiving Social Security benefits trend older, or they trend, maybe they've got some sort of physical disability or mental disability, and they're receiving Social Security insurance benefits. So they know that they're fishing from a warm pond, basically. They're fishing from they're warm leads, for lack of a better term.
Can't you trace phone numbers?
Yeah, but they're using voice over IP, and they run it through different routings. And so there's a lot of services out there where you can get a voice over IP that lasts for a week, 48 hours. So they're just constantly recycling and using different ones. What they do to try to make it look like it's legitimate is they will call you from either the area code that you have, right? So like I grew up in Maine. I still have a 207 area code. So I get a ton of scam calls from a 207, even though I haven't lived in Maine in 20 years. But they'll also call you from 202 numbers. Do you know what 202 is?
DC.
Yeah. So they'll call you a ton from 202 area codes. So if you ever get a phone call from a 202 area code, think twice, because it's not the government.
Well, number one, you already said the government will not call you.
No.
And that makes sense.
Yeah.
You can't call. There's no outbound governmental call center. No.
And I mean, you're lucky to get in touch with someone when you have to call inbound. I mean, I can tell you there's nobody like calling you and telling you, hey, you're 35 cents short on your taxes or whatever.
Not only that, if it's serious enough, they show up.
Yeah.
They don't even call you.
Yeah, I didn't call. I knocked on people's doors. I showed up with a warrant, or I showed up with, if I needed to talk to somebody, if I needed to talk to a victim or a subject or a witness, like I typically was knocking on the door because I wanted to show them my badge and my credentials and show them this is who I am and I am who I say I am. And a lot of that is, again, because these victims, especially in these types of cases, once they fall victim to an individual who claims to be from the government, they don't trust anything. And so we would have like victims. I had a lot of victims in Florida because a lot of elderly folks in Florida. And so I would call up county sheriff's departments down there and I would say, hey, listen, like I'm looking at this individual who has pulled, $200,000 out of their bank account. I'm looking at phone records. It looks like my subject has been calling that person. Can you send a marked unit out to that house, knock on the door, and find out what's going on? And these people would be convinced, despite all the evidence, despite a deputy standing in front of them saying, hey, you are a victim of a crime. I'm in uniform. This is my cruiser. Here's my credentials. They'd be convinced that the person on the other end of the phone that they were dealing with was really the good guy. No. I'm helping. I'm taking care of this. Same thing happens, these grandson in jail type scams or these, stranded servicemen overseas type scams. It's all the same sort of thing. It's all about getting someone under the ether. And I'm borrowing that from, do you know who Frank Abagnale is?
Yeah.
Okay. He that's what he calls it.
Catch me if you can.
Catch me if you can, right? He calls it getting someone under the ether, getting somebody to believe that you are who you say you are is the whole art of the scam. And these guys are very, very good at it. They're professionals.
So how did you bust them? And how do you have jurisdiction in India?
Well, I don't have jurisdiction in India.
You have to work with the Indian authorities?
Correct. Yeah. And that's, I can give you an example.
What if they're in on it?
Yeah, there's a lot of countries where you suspect that or you wonder that because there's a lot of corruption and there's a lot of guys. There's a lot of guys that I interviewed who told us that these call centers are very well known to the local police. That because you've got 1,000 guys sitting in a call center working the midnight to 8 a.m. shift in India because they're calling people in the U.S. on our time frame. So that's very suspicious, right? If you're a law enforcement officer and you see all these guys dressed business casual walking into a building at midnight, you're thinking, what's going on there? But there are plenty of legitimate call centers in India. And the reason these scam call centers operate so efficiently is because the call center industry is so well established in India. So that the infrastructure is there to build these things. But they know they're there, and these guys get kickbacks, and these guys get a little bit under the table to look the other way. And what happens so I don't have any jurisdiction outside the United States, right? I don't have any jurisdiction now because I'm not with the government anymore. But you have different treaties. You have what's called a mutual legal assistance treaty, an MLAT, with different countries. We have treaties with India. We have treaties with other countries, but whether they, abide by the terms of that. If we say, hey, listen, we've indicted 35 people on money laundering conspiracy and wire fraud conspiracy in the United States. We want you to round them up and ship them to us. They might not do that quickly. They might not do it at all, even with a treaty. And so that's kind of the situation we found ourselves in. We could name and shame them, but we couldn't actually get them to the United States unless the government of India allows it, or unless they leave India. And that's how we got one of these guys. I flew all the way to Singapore to arrest one of these guys because he got stupid and he left.
Are they ultra wealthy?
By Indian standards, yeah. Some of them are very, very wealthy. One of these guys, you can look him up. One of the guys we indicted, he goes by the name Shaggy Tacker. You can look this guy up. He's kind of known as being this big baller. Like he wasn't the originator of the IRS scam, but he perfected it. He made it like the next level of the IRS scam. He ended up buying, I think it was an Audi whatever their supercar is, their A4, R8, whatever it is. There's only like, however many of them in the world. He bought the car, the Audi that the captain of the Indian cricket team had. He bought it from the captain of the Indian cricket team. So if you think about cricket in India, it's huge, right? I don't know much about cricket, but I know that that's the biggest sport there. And so the captain of the Indian cricket team has a supercar. It's worth a pretty penny. And this scammer bought it from him. And the Indian government actually ended up seizing it. And it's just sitting there rotting on a police impound lot somewhere right now. But some of them are wealthy. The guy that I flew to Singapore to bring back was doing pretty well. And we know that he was buying off police. He was buying off government officials. He was running all sorts of different scams over there as well. So, yeah.
But the USA came to get him.
Long arm of the law, yeah. You haven't seen anything until you've been in jail in Singapore, let me tell you.
Well, you don't mess around in Singapore.
No.
From what I hear, you don't mess around there at all.
Mm-mm. You remember that kid that got caned
back in the 90s? News,
Yeah. So we flew into Singapore. So we found out, we indicted this one guy. His name was Hitesh Patel, goes by Hitesh Henlodge. He was kind of the guy who started this whole thing. The scam started out as a payday loan scam. So what he was doing was, at some point, there were legitimate call centers in India that were buying up debt in the United States. They're buying up, like if somebody took out a payday loan, didn't pay it back, eventually those things get kind of collateralized and they get sent off to call centers. They say, whatever you can get out of this, you can keep. You're basically buying our debt to get these guys who have not paid back their payday loans. So they started doing that. And then they realized, well, what if we just, call up anybody who's taken out a payday loan and threaten them and say, you didn't pay it back, and threaten them with arrest if they don't pay. So they started calling people who had paid back their loans, and they started shaking them down. And this guy kind of started at that point. And then he realized and then they went on to scamming H-1B visa holders. And then they realized everybody in America is scared of the IRS. They all pay taxes. So let's just call everybody there and just start saying we're the IRS. So he kind of was like the head of all that. And what happens with these scams is you get these monkey see, monkey do sort of things, where a guy will work in a call center, he'll learn the ropes, and he'll want to do it on his own. And so he'll go talk to the boss and he'll say, listen, I want to have a 50-seat dialer of my own. And that guy will basically franchise it out. He'll pay for the infrastructure. He'll get him set up, and you're going to pay me 10% on whatever you scam out of Americans. And so they kind of metastasize. They go all over. So this guy Hitesh, he was kind of the guy who he had 20 different call centers that he had going on under his brand. And after we indicted the case in the U.S., after we swept everybody up, we arrested people in 8 different states. We ran this massive takedown across the country at the same time. Brought all these people in. They all went to trial, or not trial. They all went to court in Houston. They all pled out. Every single one of them pled guilty. They all got sentenced. This guy figured, okay, I can poke my head back up again. I can move around the world. He took off and he flew to Singapore to open up some bank accounts or cryptocurrency accounts or something. We got notified. We were told okay, he's there. But he went out really quickly. Well, he flew back to Singapore 2 months later to do it again. And that time the authorities there were waiting for him. They knew he was coming. They snagged him. And so we went through the whole process of extradition, of having to fill out I'm talking 700 pages of paperwork that had to get signed by a judge in the U.S. and FedExed overnight to Singapore and reviewed by their judges. And you're dealing with 2 different judicial systems. So what we consider a crime here might not actually be a crime in Singapore. So they have to know that what we're extraditing him for actually violates their criminal laws as well. And when it was all said and done, extradition was approved. It was actually the first extradition under, there's a UN treaty against organized crime. It's the first extradition done under that treaty. And my team and I, we flew to Singapore, went into the jail. And I've been in jails all over the United States. I've been in jails in Central America. I have never been in a place this pristine and quiet as that jail in Singapore. I can't even describe it. It was just the most well-mannered and orderly jail I've ever been in. And when you land in Singapore, and this gives you an example of why you don't mess around in Singapore. You land in Singapore, there's signs all over that airport there that say, drug traffickers will be hung. They hang people. We drove through the area where they hang people. We were going into the jail to get this guy. So they will hang people. If you bring in chewing tobacco, if you bring in anything that's illegal there, you'll be arrested. And so there's all these signs when you go in. And,
is there an amnesty bucket where
there's amnesty buckets?
Hey,
yeah,
fucking throw that shit away right now.
Yeah, because there's a lot of Americans who go into Singapore, and a lot of guys in oil and gas. So there's a lot of guys who bring a can of Skull with them, and they're yeah. So it's in the amnesty bucket. But
what about weed?
I mean, I'm sure that's illegal because all drugs are so illegal.
Oh, there, yeah, supposedly everything's illegal. But like if you're here, you're going to Singapore and you're licensed to smoke weed here.
Yeah, I'm sure that's not going to be.
I wouldn't go to Singapore.
I wouldn't go to Singapore with it. A beautiful city. It's incredible.
But that's why it's a beautiful city.
But that's why. I mean,
because they enforce their laws.
It's the exact, bringing that full circle. It's the exact opposite of our border. Like, I mean, they enforce everything. It's an island, right? And there's like 4 million, 5 million people. And it's gorgeous. It's beautiful. But you walk around, there's guys sweeping the street. I mean, there's no like gum on the sidewalks.
Gum's not even allowed there, I heard.
You can't be walking around the street chewing gum. No. I don't know if it's illegal, but nobody's doing it.
So, but just here's the rules. Follow them.
Follow them.
And if you, by the way, because I know people that live there.
Yeah.
If you follow the rules, you're in almost the best environment you can be. It's safe. Nobody's stealing anything. You can leave your doors unlocked. You can leave your wallet on a table. It'll be there when you get back. Like from what I hear, it's just unbelievable. And the reason is law enforcement.
It's law and order to the extreme. And what's interesting about that place is we worked a lot with the Singapore police force when we were there. And all those guys are like Ivy League educated. I mean, like I have a degree from a public university, right? In anthropology. I'm not like, I didn't go to like study criminal justice at Yale. They like send their people, they identify like when they're in like 7th, 8th grade, people who are going to make good detectives, good law enforcement officers, and they put them on a career track to bring them there, and then they educate them with that in mind. So these people,
you make me want to move there.
You could do worse as an expat than to be in Singapore. I mean, I
heard it's expensive though.
It is not cheap. Yeah, I mean it's expensive. The only place I could compare it to, and it's a bad comparison, but from a wealth perspective, is probably Hong Kong. But Hong Kong's, I mean, I haven't been there in quite some time, and I understand things have changed considerably. But yeah, it's an interesting place. And I was only there for about 36 hours just to go and grab this guy and bring him back. But what's funny about it is we got him in the car. He's silent. We walk into the like Sally Port area where he's waiting for us. And there's all these little yellow squares on the floor. They're like 1 by 1 yellow squares. And he's sitting, crisscross applesauce or whatever in like one of these little squares. And there's about 15 like uniformed like prison guards there. And one of them has, all the stars and epaulets and everything. I figure he's like the big guy. He's got to be the warden. He comes up, shakes our hand. We give him our paperwork, whatever. Do the whole, photo shoot, whatever thing. We get the guy in the car. And one of my partners who was there with me spoke Hindi. And so this guy that we're arresting, he doesn't speak English, but he does speak Hindi. And he looks at my partner and he says, in Hindi, he says, "What took you so long?" So he'd been there for about 6 months, and he was like, "I know I'm facing 20 years in the U.S., but 6 months in the Singapore jail I'd rather face 20 years in the U.S." So that told me all I needed to know about how law enforcement works there. So
I'm an advocate.
Yeah. Yeah.
So now, though, you're retired. You don't mess with that no more. Right now, you're, basically coaching and you're a licensed private investigator. You help 6, 7, sometimes 8-figure businesses just protect and keep from being scammed.
Yeah, I worked for years and years and years in the reactive side, right? And so you've got, in any situation where you're dealing with a victim, or let me put it this way, anytime that a criminal investigator, special agent, detective is coming on board to look into something and to investigate a crime, it's because the horse has left the barn. Crime's done, right? And you're just coming in, you're trying to give somebody some justice, you're trying to give them some closure, maybe some restitution if you're lucky. Most times you're never going to get that, especially in a case like scam cases like this where the money just gets blown to the wind. And after a while, it weighs on you. It becomes, you deal with all of these victims who have these terrible stories. They've been ruined financially. And when I left the government, I wanted to do something that would be on the proactive side of the house, that would help people stay closer to their money, to recognize where they're vulnerable. And what I see, my wife's an entrepreneur. She owns a consultancy, and she has a lot of clients, and she has a lot of people that she works with that get roped into doing investments or deals or buying this or these Amazon, type drop ship type things. Like, it sounds like a great deal. You're going to make whatever return on your investment and all this stuff, but they don't do any of the legwork because they're entrepreneurs. They're moving a mile a minute. They're on to the next thing. They're doing this, that, and the other thing. And they're not big enough like these Fortune 500 companies where you have an entire security staff. You have an entire litigation team. You have an entire staff of lawyers behind you that are going to make sure you're not throwing your money at something you shouldn't. And so I saw, an opportunity to help be proactive and work with individuals. So I do like concierge type services with individuals with I have private investigations firm. So I'll do the investigations. If somebody's looking to do a due diligence investigation, I'll do that. I'll apply the same skill set that I applied to reactive investigations as a special agent to helping people hold on to their money in the first place. And I also work with a lot of victims of elder fraud, elder abuse, because I'm still passionate about that. And so individuals who are maybe in a conservatorship, who have been ripped off by their conservator, their money's disappeared. I'll get hired by attorneys to come in and help with conservatorship abuse cases, to do the expert witness testimony on elder abuse, to look into the bank records and find the money, follow the money, find assets to reclaim. So basically litigation support and then proactive work to try to help people identify the scam before it happens.
Are you busy?
I could be busier, but I'm also a full-time dad. I have 2 little girls, both have special needs. Like I said, both our girls are adopted. And so leaving the government, there's an opportunity to be an entrepreneur. There's also an opportunity to be more present for my family for the first time in 15 years, which was something I really took to heart. So I could always take on more clients. I have a stable of guys who have since retired from the government who I can work with to farm out that sort of work. So I'm always open to more clients, but I like to make sure that it's somebody that I can serve and that I can help first. I don't want to just, be on the phone for somebody who doesn't actually need my services, right?
So bomb squad's filled with entrepreneurs. What would you tell them? In other words, give them a message to where, hey, if you're this, call me, help them out.
I would say if you are scaling and growing, if you are a coach, if you're a consultant, if you're a solopreneur, if you have an LLC that has 10 to 15 employees, something like that, you're high 6-figure earner, low 7-figure earner, you're probably still wearing a lot of the hats yourself in your business. You're probably still doing all of those things. And so you probably have a CPA, or you probably have maybe a fractional CFO. I would consider having a fractional chief security officer. And that's the kind of service that I offer from a concierge perspective. I can come in, I can train your staff about not becoming victims. I can come in and talk to I can talk to you about how to protect yourself from various scams that are emerging. I can come in and actually do litigation support if you're looking to sue something going on where you've already been taken advantage of.
Or due diligence on an investment.
Or due diligence on an investment. If you're looking in real estate, if you're looking at an investment, call someone like me. For $1,000 or $2,000, a due diligence investigation could save you $50 or $60 or $70 or $80 or $100,000, right? Huge, right? So that proactive type stuff makes sense. Now, it doesn't have to, obviously, I'm one guy. There's plenty of guys out there, but my skill set and background as a criminal investigator who looked into money laundering and fraud cases makes me well suited to identify things that some other private investigators might not see. Or what
about if somebody's about to get a divorce and their partner's rich and they're hiding money? Would you go find that?
You can find assets.
That's the PI side of you?
That's the PI side, yeah.
So if anyone's getting a divorce, you want to make sure nobody's getting tricky with the dough.
Yeah. I charge a little more than a lot of PIs for those sort of services. So like investigative services, like, going out and following like a cheating spouse or things like that. Like, there's a lot of guys who don't have, 15 plus years of criminal investigator experience who can run a surveillance pretty effectively.
You do that?
I don't do that sort of stuff because.
So if someone said, "Hey, I think my wife's cheating on me," you're declining.
I'm not the guy to call. Yeah, no, like I like more in the numbers and the spreadsheets and following the assets, following the money, helping you save money, helping you identify if you're in litigation or complex litigation, you're trying to find somebody's assets, you're trying to find out like, hey, I invested in this Ponzi scheme and I want to get whatever I can back. Call me. But if you are, if you think your spouse is cheating, there's plenty of guys out there for that.
I got one for you.
Yeah.
Somebody said, "Hey, dude, what we do is there's people that have been in lawsuits that they've now won the lawsuit, but it takes 90 to 120 days to get their settlement. Mm-hmm. So what we do is we give them, let's say $100,000. And when they get their settlement, we get back $120,000. So you can have half of that and we'll take half of that. So it's basically 10% return every quarter. So for every $100,000 you give us, we'll give you back 110.
I get you.
So I said, this is not too good to be true, yada, yada, yada. But I watched my friends get paid every quarter for 2 straight years. And these guys have a couple $1 million in it. And I'm like, damn, dude, like I'm missing out. Like this is legit. This is legit. And it sounds legit because if I didn't have any money and I had a settlement coming in 4 months, and you said, hey, Brad, I'll give you $100,000 advance and just give me 120 when you get your money, I'd say, okay.
Yeah.
So it sounded legit. It was with a law firm. You sent your money to a law firm, the whole thing. So I'm like, okay, fine, I'll do it. And I did it. I got like 1 or 2 quarters worth of payments. And I'm like, this is freaking crazy. I was about to tell all my friends about it. And then all of a sudden I see the news, and there's a lawyer who's in the shootout with the FBI, and turns out to be a $600 million Ponzi scheme. And that's the one I was in.
There you go.
And now I'm like, I ain't getting my money back is what I thought. Like I just said, whatever. So I can hire you. How are you going to get my money back if it's gone?
Well, you're going to look for assets is essentially it. Right. So and it may be gone. Yeah. And that's, you may get more. Was this guy killed in the shootout?
No.
Okay.
And they're recovering assets. I just don't know how eventually I get my money back, because usually when it goes to some conservator with the government that goes and seizes all the assets, liquidates all the assets, there's all these fees that need to be paid back, and then what's left goes to the victims. Well, if the victims are out $600 million and they recovered every dime of it, minus the fees and shit that I think those people take, you're not getting back what you put in.
What you're getting more justice than restitution in this case.
Well, they're already busted. Justice is served.
That's it. And because what I would say is, if you find yourself in that situation where there's already a criminal investigation.
Well, what I should have done was, before I did it, called you.
There you go. Yeah.
And said, hey, here's the deal.
Yeah.
Here's what they're claiming. And you would have went and said, yeah, this is legit or not.
Right. I would have given an assessment of the facts, right? And I would have given you more information to make a better decision, right? To say, okay, this looks too good to be true. Here's all the facts. Here's all the facts about the guy behind it. Here's some information about other people who have been involved in it. I may have found stuff in databases that was outside of what's publicly available, and been able to present a report to you that said, make a decision, but make a decision that's based on all the facts, right? And that's what I like to do, because it helps entrepreneurs keep more money in their pocket. And it allows you to not have to deal with this on the back end. This idea of, like you just described, is exactly how it goes, right? The case that I worked, this $300 million fraud case, we were only able to recover about $2 million for the victims. We had over 17,000 victims. Now, it doesn't go that far when you split 17,000 ways, right? And some of these people lost hundreds of thousands, some lost a couple thousand, but
pretty much you got to think, if you're scammed, you're scammed.
You're scammed, right? And that's why I always told my people my victims was, you're going to get more justice than restitution. You might get restitution down the road, a small percentage, but don't think that $30,000 that went out the door is going to come back to you, unless, you were quick enough. You sent that $30,000 out in a FedEx box, and you realized, after you walked away from the FedEx, that I think I just got scammed. And you call right away, like, I can stop that. You give me like 48 hours, I can make that happen. But no, by and large, once you've cut the check or given it to somebody, it's going to take a long time to come back to you, if at all, and it's going to come back to you in a smaller percentage.
What is your podcast about? The Indispensable Man.
Yeah. I spent, like I said, over 15 years in law enforcement, but I was also an endurance athlete. So I raced Ironmans and marathons and ultra marathons. And I learned a lot about mindset and a lot about overcoming adversity, a lot about putting yourself in tough situations to become tougher. And so I talk about those sort of things on the podcast. And it's mostly, it's directed at helping people. I like to say, live your life with valor, live with a little bit more courage, put yourself out there and push your edge. And one thing I didn't tell you about is and I talk about on the podcast a little bit, I put my own boss in jail back when I was a rookie agent. And so I've dealt with some adversity in the career. I've dealt with some adversity on the race course that I think is transferable knowledge to a lot of people. And so I put it out there on the podcast.
What about the book?
Same thing. I mean, I like to say that there's nothing special about me. I raced 6 Ironmans, a bunch of ultra marathons. Like, that's hard stuff to do, but anyone can do it. But you have to have the right mindset. And I know you're probably friends with Alex Hormozy.
Yeah.
He's been on the podcast before. He talks about character traits, skills, and beliefs, right? And I think those things are transferable and applicable across anything that you want to do. Why don't people get into entrepreneurship? So it's that comfort trap of that W-2 job. They're scared, right? They're afraid that but what if I fail? And the answer to that should be, but what if you fly? Like, it would be unreasonable for you to be great at anything you do right when you first do it, but you got to keep showing up, and you got to keep getting back up and keep fighting. And so the book and the podcast are about that. That's what the public speaking's about. It's about, I didn't make the largest tele-fraud case in U.S. history because I had any sort of natural skill set. I didn't come from a law enforcement family. I didn't have the background that would make me an incredible, financial crimes investigator. What I had was an inability to stop when victims needed someone to be there for them. And that was all 100% mindset. That was all 100% attitude. And so for me, putting that out there is kind of similar. I approach everything like I did like a search warrant. Search warrant, you're putting together a tactical plan. You've got your doorman, you've got your perimeter guys. Everybody's got their role. Everybody knows what they're supposed to do. You have your debrief afterwards. What went right, what went wrong, what could we do better? You have a briefing beforehand. You plan contingencies. Do we have medical on site? Do we have, an ambulance or a helicopter? Have we notified the locals so that there's no blue on blue situations? All that stuff, right? Plan your life the way you plan something like that, because your life depends on it in a tactical environment, right?
But forgetting the bombs, there's a bomb right there.
Bomb right there. Plan your life and attack your life like your life depends on it. And that's how I did it in the field. It was, get that everything on paper, figure out exactly what you need to do to go from this point to this point. How's this fit in with your strategic vision? What's your long-term goal? So if I'm doing this search warrant, how does this impact and affect the case down the road? What is the point of the evidence I hope to collect here? What do I hope to do with that? Because if there's no point, if it doesn't serve my long-term strategic goal, tactical plan means nothing.
Yeah.
Why are you even doing it? Right? So understanding the book, the podcast are really about understanding your strategic long-term goals and recognizing the tactics that you need to keep moving forward, to keep showing up.
That's awesome. Well, dude, you've helped a lot of people. I appreciate you coming in. Last question. How can the bomb squad, I always point at the camera.
I point at the camera.
Yours is over here.
Yeah, there it is.
But how can the bomb squad support you? You've helped a lot of people. How can we help you?
Educate your parents, guys, first and foremost. Speaking about scams and frauds, like letting your parents, if they're in that baby boomer generation, if they're 70 plus, they're 65 plus. I'll tell you this, that podcast that I was on, they made a podcast about this $300 million case that I did. It's called Chameleon Scam Likely. So if you want to know more about the case, you can listen to it. It's an 8-part serial podcast. It was one of the top 10 podcasts in the world in 2022, and it tells the whole story. I told my dad, I was like, hey, I'm going to be on this podcast, and you should listen to this. He didn't know how. And so I had to go, I had to show him on his phone how to download a podcast. I do all this. He's 70 years old, right? And so the target audience here are people who are likely victims, and they're not getting the information from maybe they're not your target audience on this podcast, right? So if you're on the bomb squad, share this with your parents. Share that podcast with your parents, first of all. Chameleon Scam Likely. Make them listen to that because they are the target audience. They need to know what's out there and how they can become victims. And just educate. Pay attention to what your parents are doing. If they're pulling out large sums of money and doing things like that, press pause. Be an advocate for the people in your lives who are older Americans who are the intended victims of these scams. And if I can help you with anything, you find me on Instagram. That's the easiest place to find me at team_Healey, Healey, or my website, KristoforHealey.com. And,
with a K?
With a K. It's not Kristoff.
Krist.
Kristofor, yeah. My middle name's Robin, by the way. Ask me about that. Kristofor Robin.
Why?
Everybody always asks me if I was named after a Winnie the Pooh character. My mom, late 60s, still won't admit it. She says, no, it's just, I just like the way it sounded. So.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, also share this podcast with your parents. Get a few more listeners. I appreciate all the support you guys give my guests. You guys give the show. And I appreciate guys like you that are out there freaking fighting the good fight.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate you coming in.
Thanks
folks,
for having me.
As always, keep an eye out for the nonsense and keep it real.
I think there's 4 things that motivate people. There are 4 M's. The first one is material things / money. Okay. The second thing is mating / sex, love. Sex. The third thing is mastery / status. And the fourth is movement.